Let's consider capital punishment. Do people really want to say that there is no crime that is so terrible that it warrants the death penalty? No crime? I remember in the 60s when Eichmann was being tried, the socialist government of Israel, which sorts of is very liberal and had eliminated the death penalty, had this dilemma and concluded that the crimes that Eichmann was being charged with, genocide on the scale that he was a critical piece of the machinery that without which it would not have happened as well as efficiently as it happened, that crime was too great not to punish it with death. And it's the only time I believe that death penalty was carried out in Israel. In other words, the statement there was that there are possible crimes that are so serious that even people who are opposed to the death penalty would say warrant a death penalty. The idea is this. It's really a question of what you think justice means. The classic idea of justice, pre-Lyndon Johnson, pre the 60s, and all the revolution that took place then, justice was viewed as a blind figure holding a scale. And in the scales represented the idea that justice sought to recreate balance between things. On the one side of the scale was the crime, was the people who were harmed, including the society that was deranged by the crime for as long as it was, and wounded in its fabric by the crime, but more concretely the victims and their family. That was on the one side, and on the other side was the punishment that was requisite, that would have balanced that kind of crime out. Justice was conceived of as a balancing between this and that, a restoring of balance, very much in the ancient Greek sense that Aristotle so extolled, that all good really comes finally when things are well balanced, one against the other, nothing in excess. But the modern notion of justice, this business that is promulgated now widely, really has no sense of scale. It has no sense of balance, and it really pushes the question of justice aside as not consequential, and brings to the fore the question of mercy, which becomes all important. How much mercy can we show, is to be shown, etc., is the first question, is the primary question, not questions of justice or balance or of scaling this. How terrible is this in the scheme of things? Also the idea, which I kind of alluded to, of healing those who were hurt by showing your regard for their persons and by respecting the pain and anguish that they had to undergo, or that was dealt to them by this criminal, whoever it was. That healing that was critical to the old view of how to deal with criminality, that was gone too, because the victim and the person who was the brunt of the crime is not in the foreground. In the foreground is the criminal. I always said that they say photograph an execution and you'll see how horrible it is, and everyone will demand that execution stop. I always said, yeah, and if you had a split screen and at the same time as you were photographing the horror of the execution, you had the ability to show this man or woman, usually man, killing mercilessly the person that they killed, and the sight of that and the person screaming for help and the sadistic expression on the killer's face, or the cold expression on the killer's face as they brutally, savagely did whatever they did. If you could see both of those in split screen, you would not say that what was done to the murderer was cruel and out of proportion, or out of proportion would not even be your question, would not be merciless, because mercy comes in only after justice is done, and that very much is a principle of many systems of law. Mercy can only come to be after justice is been applied to the satisfaction of everyone who has been harmed by the wrongdoing. Then mercy may be a factor. And there are crimes that are so terrible that mercy is never brought to the fore. That the justice finally, when it's finally measured out in its proper measure, is one that warrants the death penalty for that person. This is all in the end rooted in your own religious beliefs, whether you're progressive and you think you're free of religion, or whether you have a religion. The core is, if you had the wherewithal to go back and expose it in yourself, the core is a religious belief in human life and its sanctity. And there are those who say that there are people who give up the right to claim that cover, that is to say, protection of their own human life as something sacred, when if they have been monstrous enough in not allowing anyone else, someone else, others, that sanctity and that protection, and in some cruel way took their lives, that they forego that. And I certainly hold that, but it's not with great pleasure, and I'd rather see capital punishment not employed. However, there are times when it's absolutely wanted, not for prevention, not for any social hygienic reason, although I think that that is important. I think that's there, but that's not the main reason by any means, but to reestablish balance and to create appropriate healing.